Hello, welcome to ASL demola, and today's lesson we're going to be talking about gaseous exchange. Very important as a foundational topic because it's going to be about how we get oxygen into our bloodstream, which we're going to use for respiration, linking into like protein synthesis and stuff like that. So important that we get this right, and we're going to get straight into it now. We're going to begin this off by looking at surface area to volume ratio. Now, let's define these things. So your surface area is the total area an organism is exposed to in its external environment, whereas the volume is the total internal volume of the organism. And we are going to use the surface area volume ratio to compare organisms of different sizes. So you've got, like, for example, an amoeba, something that's really small, compared to, I don't know, like an elephant that's really massive. Yeah. We want to use surface area volume ratio so that we can get a better comparison between those in terms of how efficient they're going to be at doing gaseous exchange. So let's look at these. Yeah. I've drawn three cubes. I've drawn three cubes. One has sides of 2 centimeter, one of 4, and one of 8. As you can do, we've done a surface area. So you find the area of one side times it by 8. Done that for all of them. And then volume, base times length times height. Yeah. Width times length times height. So as you can see here, your surface area volume ratio for the first one is 4:1. So we're going to highlight these. For the first one, it was 4:1. Oopsie. 4:1, 2:1, and then 1:1. So you can see that your surface area volume ratio is decreasing as you get larger, whereas your actual surface areas and your volumes are both increasing, but you can see the rate at which the volume increases is going to be more than the rate at which the surface area increases, which is why you don't have a problem. Right? Single-celled organisms, because they're really small, they've got high surface area volume ratio. Hence, simple diffusion is going to be enough for it to get its nutrients like oxygen and all these minerals and stuff like that. Whereas your multicellular organisms, which tend to be a bit bigger, they are going to struggle. So they need a gas exchange surface that are going to help it to increase the rates of diffusion so that you can get enough oxygen for respiration. You can get enough nutrients so that you can do reactions such as protein synthesis and stuff like that. So we're going to get into more of that in the next part. Okay, so I believe we maybe touched on it in the last part, but why do we actually need gas exchange surfaces, right? So most of it is going to be about you need oxygen, you need nutrients, right? So aerobic respiration, you need oxygen. Photosynthesis, we're going to need carbon dioxide, yeah? You need those, these are gases, but you need these nutrients so that you can facilitate processes that your organism needs to survive, right? So at an exchange of surface, we're going to swap one molecule for another, and your exchange will occur via diffusion. Again, we're going to get more into that later. Let's look at Fick's law. Cool. Fick's law is really, really important to remember, right? Let's first of all define diffusion. So your diffusion is going to be the net movement of molecules from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. Happy days. Now, let's look at Fick's law. Fick's law dictates that the rate of diffusion is directly proportional to the concentration gradient multiplied by the surface area divided by the diffusion distance. So, what can we gain from that formula? Right? From that formula, I can tell the rate of diffusion is going to be increased if we have a greater surface area and a greater concentration gradient, because those are your numerators. And if you reduce the diffusion distance, you're going to increase the rate of diffusion, and that's because diffusion distance is the denominator. I hope that all makes sense. So Fick's law is going to be really important. I feel like they don't tend to really ask questions about calculations using Fick's law, or they definitely could. They would give it to you in an exam if they did ask, so just be aware of that. So all of that is great in theory, but let's actually talk about what do the mammalian lungs, let me try that again, mammalian lungs, what kind of adaptations do we have there that are going to help us to increase your gaseous exchange? Cool. Before we even get into that, I want to just talk about the respiratory tract. Guys, honestly, if this comes up, it's an easy mark. I want to make sure that you get this, yeah? You just need to know the pathway which air is going to flow through. So air normally enters through the nose, right, nasal cavity, and it's going to go down to the pharynx, into your larynx, and then, so the larynx is this bit. Let me see if I can circle it. Zoom in. The larynx is going to be this bit here, yeah? So your air is going to go literally into the nose, yeah, down the pharynx, then it's going to enter into the larynx, yeah? Goes into the trachea, and the trachea goes into your bronchi, bronchioles, alveoli. Yep, hopefully that made sense. So you can kind of see about the flow of air there. And your diaphragm here at the bottom, your diaphragm, that's the main muscle that we use for breathing. So really, really important muscle there. Now, surface area. We talked about in the last part about factors that are going to increase your rate of diffusion, right, in accordance with Fick's law. And there are going to be specific things that we do in our lungs that are going to help us to achieve that. So in terms of surface area, we have a lot of alveoli. So you see these things in the pink here. These are alveoli, and they're all kind of clumped together. They're all in that one area. You have so many of them that it creates a larger surface area. Cool. As well as that, the alveolar epithelium is folded. So because it's folded, that also increases the surface area. You've got an extensive network of capillaries here. I've tried to draw them in the red and the blue, right? So you've got a really extensive capillary network, which also is going to help to increase the surface area. And I hope my diagram isn't too awful there. So let's go back to the concentration gradient. All right. So we're going to want to increase the concentration gradient. And we can do that because you get a constant flow of deoxygenated blood through your capillaries to your alveoli. And you also got constant ventilation, as in you've got oxygen constantly coming in and carbon dioxide constantly being removed. The best way I can find this is if we're constantly getting deoxygenated blood that's rich in carbon dioxide to the alveoli, that carbon dioxide is getting exchanged. So let's draw it here again. The carbon dioxide that's all coming in, right, it's coming here and it's going there, right? And then because of ventilation, this carbon dioxide is removed. Hence, we're going to have a low oxygen concentration coming into the alveoli. And we know about diffusion, yeah? High concentration to low concentration. So the oxygen that's being brought in by ventilation, right, is going to want to go into the capillary because the concentration of oxygen is so low, right? And that's concentration of oxygen is so low because the blood is deoxygenated. Cool. Now, if we have oxygen constantly being removed into the blood, yeah, that means that we also want to be breathing in so that we can replenish the oxygen in the alveoli. So you get a kind of cycle that's really going to help you to increase your rate of diffusion by increasing the concentration gradient. And finally, we've got your diffusion distance. So the capillary endothelium is 1 cell thick, and the alveolar epithelium is also 1 cell thick. Guys, please do not confuse the 2 times. Alveolar epithelium, capillary endothelium. Really easy to mix up, but it does cost you a mark if you do. So just be aware of that. And I've drawn a little diagram there as well to represent that. Okay, so it's time to get into the questions now. Got 2 here. First one. Describe and explain how the lungs maintain a steep concentration gradient for oxygen. And another one, people with emphysema often have damaged alveolar walls. Explain why this reduces gaseous exchange. We're going to give you time, pause the video, and then we'll go through the answers. Okay, here was all the marking points for the questions. So, like we said in one of the parts before, you bring in oxygen for your alveoli via ventilation, and you're bringing in your deoxygenated blood through the capillaries, yeah? You already have the concentration gradient there, whether it's high in the alveoli, low in the capillary. So oxygen is going to want to diffuse into the bloodstream, into the capillaries. Then that oxygenated blood now is going to be removed. It's going to go through your pulmonary vein, right, back to the heart. Cool. So you remove the oxygenated blood. Now, that means that you have a steep oxygen concentration gradient where there's always going to be a lower concentration of oxygen in the blood compared to the capillary. That's your question 1. Now, question 2. Like we said about the alveolar walls, they're folded, right? So because they're folded, you're going to reduce your gaseous exchange. That's what we know, because surface area is going to be worse. Now, you can increase the diffusion distance as well because of thicker walls. Emphysema is a disease that will cause thicker walls. Some of you may have known that, some of you may have not. Either way, now you do. So if you have that, you're going to have less efficient ventilation as well because your lungs are going to be struggling to take in air as well. So slower rate of diffusion because the surface area is gone, the diffusion distance is gone, and the concentration gradient as well is affected. So you can see how we always link it back to those 3 things. That's really, really important. And I guess that means it's time for the A-star tips. So what do I definitely want you to do? Know the factors that affect the rate of diffusion, right? Concentration gradient, diffusion distance, surface area. Always link it back to Fick's law. And in your questions, always relate or try to relate to these 3 things because that's going to help you massively in the exam to kind of know what you need to talk about. Now, know the flow of air through the respiratory tract. Maybe they won't ask it, but if they do, it's a really easy mark to get, and it's definitely not one that you want to miss. And I think also, just know with gaseous exchange, carbon dioxide and oxygen are both being exchanged. I think it's easy to forget carbon dioxide. So just remember that's happening as well. Now, later in this topic too, we are going to talk about cystic fibrosis. But what you're going to need to do is how your airflow obstruction in cystic fibrosis is going to reduce gaseous exchange. That's going to be a really, really important point when we get there. And also, I'll just use your terms fully. So, like, don't say there's a lot of particles in one area. Say there's a high concentration of particles. Don't say there's more space, there's a bigger surface area. You know what I mean? In biology, you just have to be really, really specific to get these marks. Now, what do I not want you to do? I don't want you to state the adaptation alone. So, like, for example, I don't want you to just say extensive capillary network. I want you to say that increases surface area, increasing the rate of diffusion. Yeah. So just stuff like that are going to nuance your answers a bit more so that you pick up more marks. And also, don't confuse ventilation with gaseous exchange. It does happen. Just know ventilation is that process of bringing air into the lungs or into your alveoli as well. Whilst gaseous exchange is that process of getting the oxygen and carbon dioxide moving between your alveoli and your capillaries. Okay, thank you so much for listening. I hope this lesson's been really, really helpful on gaseous exchange. Please subscribe, drop any questions in the comments, like the video, and I'll do my best to answer them all. Bye for now.